Rory McIlroy has already made his position clear on one part of Brian Rolapp's new PGA Tour plan. He does not want historic tournaments pushed aside just because they cannot match the money of the biggest events. That matters because the 2028 system is not a small schedule change. The PGA Tour is creating a championship series and a challenger series, with promotion and relegation between them. At least 20 players will move up. Players outside the top 90 could lose their place at the top level. Rory later backed the overall plan as a positive step, but his earlier warning exposed the problem that could become the biggest fight of the whole system. What happens to the players, tournaments, and traditions that do not fit inside the new top tier? My view is simple. A stronger merit system makes sense. Destroying the value of historic events does not. Do you agree? If player power matters, subscribe. Because the real story is not whether the PGA Tour is changing. It is who gets protected when the cuts begin. And that question starts with what Rolapp is actually building. The new structure is designed around one simple idea. The best players should play each other more often, and players should have to earn their place. The championship series is expected to contain roughly 23 to 24 events. Fields will be around 120 players. Regular events will carry minimum purses of $20 million, with a 36-hole cut. The Challenger Series will run separately, with at least 20 events, 144 player fields, and minimum purses of $4 million. That sounds clean on paper. The problem begins when you look at what happens underneath the headline. The PGA Tour says at least the top 90 players on the season-long championship series list will keep their status for the next season. Everyone below that line faces the possibility of relegation. They can still fight back through a 4 to 6 event last chance series, but there will be fewer seats at the top. At the same time, at least 20 Challenger Series players will earn promotion. That creates a sporting pressure that the current system does not have in the same form. A player cannot simply assume that his place will always be there. One bad season could matter. 2 bad seasons could matter even more. Yet the player ranking is only half of the problem. The other half is the tournament schedule. Rory's criticism was aimed directly at that issue. He warned that some existing events could become second-class tournaments if they could not produce the financial power needed for the top level. He specifically pointed to the Canadian Open as the kind of historic event that should not simply be treated like a developmental stop. That is where his position becomes more complicated than the title suggests. Rory was not simply fighting against competition. He was questioning what the tour would lose while trying to make itself more elite. The ranking system is clear. The tournament question is not. And that uncertainty is where the player rebellion story really begins. A Canadian player could play the Canadian Open. A Texas player could return to a Texas event. A player with a long connection to a tournament could still make it part of his schedule. Under the new model, that flexibility becomes harder. Championship Series players will not simply be able to drop down and play Challenger Series events whenever they want. The Tour has created separate eligibility structures for the 2 levels. That creates a difficult choice for certain events. If an historic tournament is placed in the Challenger Series, it could still have a strong field. It could still offer at least $4 million. It could still produce a winner who earns promotion, but it would no longer sit on the same level as the biggest Championship Series events. For a tournament that has spent decades building its name, that difference could be enormous. Sponsors notice it. Players notice it. Fans notice it. And Rory noticed it before the final structure was announced. His concern, therefore, goes much deeper than one tournament. It raises a question about what the PGA Tour believes professional golf should be. Should the Tour become a smaller, stronger product built around the biggest stars? Or should it protect a wider network of tournaments that gives professional golf its history and regional identity? Rolapp's answer is clearly moving toward the first model. His argument is based on merit. The Tour wants clearer stakes. It wants the best players together more often. It wants tournaments to matter more. It wants promotion to mean something and relegation to hurt. That is why the top 90 line is so important. Imagine a player sitting 89th with 2 events left. He is safe. Then imagine another player sitting 94th. That player is not simply fighting for a better FedEx Cup position. He is fighting for access to the entire top level the following year. That changes how every tournament feels. A missed cut is no longer just a missed cut. A bad Sunday is no longer just a bad Sunday. The points table becomes a career pressure point. And there is another group watching all of this from below. The Challenger Series players. At least 20 of them will move up every year. Multiple winners can earn immediate promotion, and winning a major can also produce an immediate move into the Championship Series. That gives younger players something the old system often struggled to create: a clear target. You do not need to wait for someone to retire. You do not need to hope a sponsor gives you a chance. You can earn your way upward. Rolapp has built a ladder. Rory's question is who gets pushed off it. That difference makes the coming fight much more interesting than a simple player versus commissioner story. Because Rory has spent years pushing for a stronger product for the best players too. He has supported changes that put more attention on elite competition. He has been deeply involved in the tour's larger battle over the future of professional golf. So when he criticizes the effect of the new system on historic events, the argument is not coming from someone who wants the old PGA Tour frozen forever. It is coming from someone asking whether the tour can become more valuable without making part of its own history less valuable. The PGA Tour itself says the new structure is designed to put fans first. Rolapp has said the tour heard calls for the best players to compete against each other more often, for clearer stakes and for a stronger season-long story. The difficult part is deciding what happens to the tournaments that cannot reach that financial level. The current plan leaves some details open. The tour has said additional eligibility criteria will include tournament winners, medical extensions, and career milestones. The full criteria are still being finalized. Some events for the championship series also remain to be determined. That means the map is not finished. It may be about the 91st player, or the tournament that finishes outside the championship series schedule, or the player who wants to return home for one event but is not allowed to move freely between the two levels. Those are the pressure points that can turn a clean business model into a player revolt. Rory's Canadian Open comments showed exactly why. He was not arguing that every tournament deserves the same purse. He was warning that money could become the deciding factor in whether an event keeps its identity. That is a very different complaint. It also explains why the word cuts in this story is more powerful than it first appears. The tour is not simply cutting players. It is cutting access. It is separating fields. It is separating money. It is separating competitive status. It is creating a line between players who belong at the top and players who must fight their way back. That can produce better golf. It can also create resentment. And resentment becomes dangerous when enough players start asking the same question: who decided that this was the right line? The next problem is not the 90th spot. It is the player who thinks he deserves the 90th spot. That is where the individual player stories begin to matter. For a young Challenger Series player, the new system could be the best opportunity of his career. 20 promotions every year is not a small number. A player can build a season around that target. Win enough, finish high enough, move up. The pressure is brutal, but the path is clear. For an established Championship Series player near the bottom, the same structure feels completely different. He is not chasing a dream, he is defending a position. That psychological difference could shape the entire tour. One player is trying to climb, another is trying not to fall. The same leaderboard creates two completely different stories. Then there are the established stars. For them, the immediate danger is lower. A player like Rory is not realistically sitting on the edge of the top 90 line because of one poor week. His career record and current standing give him a far stronger position. That is precisely why his tournament argument carries weight. He can criticize the system without simply sounding afraid of relegation. His concern is about what the structure does to professional golf around the stars. That is also why his comments cannot be reduced to a simple rejection of Rolapp. Publicly, Rory supported the overall June 23 announcement. He called it a positive development and welcomed the effort to bring more structure to professional golf. So the real conflict is narrower. Rory supports the direction. He has questioned the consequences. That is much more interesting than pretending he rejected everything, because now the question becomes whether the PGA Tour can solve the problem he identified before the 2028 system becomes permanent. The tour still has details to finalize. It gives players room to push. It gives sponsors room to push. It gives tournament organizers room to push. It also gives Rolapp room to defend the core idea without necessarily defending every detail. That is important because the system is already moving forward. The boards approved it. The two-series model is scheduled for 2028. The top 90 retention rule is part of the plan. The minimum 20 promotions are part of the plan. The last chance series is part of the plan. The financial gap between the two levels is part of the plan. Those pieces are no longer just rumors. They are the foundation. What remains open is how hard the system will hit the people around them, and that is where the next battle could become very personal. Think about a player who has spent 10 years building his career around one tournament. He is not a superstar. He is not a major champion. He may never be. But that event could be the week his fans see him, his sponsor gets attention, and his hometown gets a reason to care about the PGA Tour. Now imagine that tournament moves to the Challenger Series. The player may still play. The event may still survive. Yet the entire value of the week changes. That is the exact fear behind Rory's warning. Not that golf disappears, that the identity of certain tournaments slowly disappears. And once that happens, bringing it back may be much harder. That is the part the money cannot easily replace. Rolapp's answer would be that the old system already had a problem. The new system tries to make the stakes easier to understand. Win, move up, perform, stay up. Struggle, fight to return. For a sports league, that is a powerful formula. It creates consequences. It creates stories. It creates players with something to lose every week. The question is whether golf can apply that formula without losing the events that made the tour matter in the first place. That is the line Rory is standing on. He is not asking the tour to remove competition. He is asking whether competition has to mean the death of the middle, because there is a middle in professional golf. There are the superstars. There are the future stars. Then there are the players and tournaments that connect the two. Remove that middle too aggressively, and the tour could become cleaner but less broad. Protect it too much, and the tour could remain messy, with top players spread across too many events. Rolapp is trying to solve the second problem. Rory is warning about the first. Neither argument is easy to dismiss. That is why the 2028 model deserves more attention than the headline numbers. The $20 million purses matter. The $4 million challenger purses matter. The 120-player championship fields matter. The 144-player challenger fields matter. Yet the most important number may be 90, because 90 is where security ends. Below that line, the season becomes a fight for status, and the players who live near that line will create the drama that the new system promises. That is not a small change. It can change the tournaments he plays, the money he earns, the exposure he receives, and the path back to the top. The Last Chance series gives him one more opportunity, but it does not give him certainty. That is exactly what promotion and relegation are supposed to do. They remove certainty. Now the question is whether Rory's warning can change what happens to everyone below the stars. The PGA Tour has still not finished every detail. The exact future schedule is still being developed. The role of certain events is still being decided. So anyone saying every historic event has already been permanently cut from the top level is going too far. That has not happened. What has happened is more important for this story. The tour has created a system where those decisions now carry greater consequences. A tournament that misses the championship series is not simply missing a normal PGA Tour week. It is moving into a different competitive world. A player who misses the top 90 is not simply having a bad FedEx Cup season. He is losing access to the championship series unless he finds another route back. That is the new reality. Rory's public support for the overall model does not erase his earlier concern. It makes the debate sharper. Because now the PGA Tour has to prove that meritocracy can coexist with history. Rolapp has promised a more competitive future. Rory has warned about what could be lost. And the first real test will not come from a press conference. It will come when the numbers begin pushing real people out. That is when the clean theory of promotion and relegation meets professional golf. A player will miss by one position. A tournament will miss by one financial requirement. A sponsor will ask why the biggest names are somewhere else. A hometown crowd will wonder why its biggest star cannot play. Those moments will determine whether this becomes the PGA Tour's strongest reform in years or the system that creates a new fight inside the sport. Rory has already shown where he stands on the biggest danger. He wants the tour to become stronger. He also wants its historic events to remain meaningful. Rolapp wants a structure where performance carries consequences. The two positions can coexist. The real test comes when they collide over an actual tournament, an actual player, and an actual place in the championship series. That is when this stops being a policy debate. It becomes a fight over who professional golf is really being built for. And if the first season under this system produces a famous player outside the top 90 or a historic tournament pushed into the Challenger Series, Rory's warning will suddenly look very different. Because then the question will no longer be theoretical. It will have a name. It will have a leaderboard. It will have a tournament people care about. It will have players demanding answers. The new tour has a ladder. The next fight will be over who gets to stay at the top. That is why the Rory Rolapp story is bigger than one disagreement. Rory's public record shows support for the new structure. His earlier criticism shows that support has limits. Rolapp's model is built around stronger elite fields, clearer consequences, and a real path for players to rise. The risk is that the same system could weaken tournaments that cannot afford to compete at the highest financial level. The PGA Tour has not finished every detail. That leaves room for the players to influence what comes next. But once 2028 arrives, the argument will be tested by results. The players who believe the new system has gone too far will have to decide whether criticism is enough or whether they are willing to push back together. Because a tour can change its schedule with a board vote. Changing what players are willing to accept is much harder. Drop 90 in the comments. Should the PGA Tour protect historic events, or should every spot be earned strictly by performance? If you want the player side of golf's biggest power fights, subscribe.